The world is filled with amazing tourist attractions and breathtaking sights. But what do you do if you find yourself stuck in Sweden instead? Not to worry, I'm gonna show you the best Swedish alternatives to famous attractions all over the world. Even though I have to admit that these are the budget options. Christ the Redeemer is a famous Art Deco statue in Rio de Janeiro that people have admired for almost 100 years. The statue is 30 meters tall and it stands on an 8-meter high foundation on top of a cliff overlooking the city of Rio de Janeiro. It's worshipped and admired by 2 million visitors every year, and it's a world-famous landmark. But what do you do if you can't travel to Brazil to see it? Well, ever since 2003, you can see another religious statue on top of a peak in Sweden instead. Heliga Birgitta, Bridgette of Sweden, was a Swedish saint from the 14th century. She was known for her kindness, and in her 40s she started getting religious revelations that she wrote down. She was canonized as a saint in 1391, and she's Sweden's most famous Catholic. And ever since 2003, you can also see her praying over drivers on Road 32. It's not exactly as impressive as Christ the Redeemer, but it's a bit of a funny thing that catches you off guard every time you drive past here. I guess that I would have preferred to go to Rio instead of watching this statue, but I'll take what I can get here in Sweden. Everyone loves the Lord of the Rings films, and everyone wants to visit Hobbiton to enjoy the simple and pleasant life of a hobbit. And you can actually do that in New Zealand at the Hobbiton Movie Set. The problem is that New Zealand is on the other side of the world, and it takes like a day and a half just to travel there. But worry not, you can actually enjoy the pleasures of Hobbiton here in Stockholm instead. Hobbit Stockholm is a bed and breakfast that caters to Lord of the Rings fans visiting the capital of Sweden. However, a simple overnight stay is 2,500 Swedish krona, 250 euros. And you can also make it a luxury visit for 4,000 Swedish krona. That includes dinner and breakfast. Sorry, I mean breakfasts, because of course you get second breakfast as well. If you pay 1,000 Swedish krona more, you can also get a visit from Gandalf. Now, it might not be exactly the same as the Hobbiton movie set, but if you don't want to travel to the other side of the world, then it's the best that Sweden has to offer. Stonehenge has fascinated people for hundreds of years. Who built that ancient monument, and why? It's located in Salisbury, England, and to get there you first have to get to London, and then you have to take the train to Salisbury, and then you have to take a bus to get to Stonehenge. That's quite a bit of an effort just to see a bunch of stones, isn't it? Instead, you can just go to the south of Sweden and look at stenar instead. Stenar is a Vendel-era monument from around the year 600 AD. It's in the shape of a ship, and monuments like these are called stone ships in Sweden. Just like with Stonehenge, no one is really sure why it was built. It could be a burial mound, but it could also have had other uses. Some believe that it was an astronomical calendar, for example, just like many people believe about Stonehenge as well. So instead of traveling to England to ponder the mysteries of Stonehenge, you can stay in Sweden and ponder the mysteries of stenar. The Forbidden City is a legendary imperial palace complex in Beijing, and it's quite an amazing sight. I was fortunate enough to go there in 2009, even though I only took some normal touristy photos, so no video footage from there, unfortunately. It was the residence of 24 Ming and Qing dynasty emperors, and it was also the center of political power in China from 1420 to 1924. It's also a place that's pretty far from Sweden, so most people won't get the opportunity to see it. However, you can still see a part of China in Sweden if you travel to the town of Gävle, north of Stockholm. Dragon Gate was a place where Swedish and Chinese businessmen were supposed to meet. It was gonna have a hotel, a restaurant, a museum, and even a Shaolin monastery. However, the place never actually opened. There's been a lot of bankruptcies, shoddy construction, non-existent business plans, and in general, it's all a bit of a mess. In the end, Dragon Gate was a complete disaster, but it's still an amazing place to visit. It really is a beautiful place, even if it's just a half-completed dream at this point, and it does lie right next to the highway. But it's as close as you can get to China and the Forbidden City in Sweden. The Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco is an iconic landmark of the city. It's an instantly recognizable symbol for the Bay Area, and it's also a marvel of engineering. It's also located in the US West Coast, which is a long way from Sweden. And if you really think about it, all it is a bridge. Surely there's gotta be some Swedish equivalents to it. We have a couple of famous bridges in Sweden, like Ölandsbron or the Öresund Bridge that connects Denmark and Sweden. But I found one gruesome statistic that made me think of a different Swedish bridge. The Golden Gate Bridge is the second most popular place in the world for suicide, after the Nanjing Yangtze Bridge in China. As many as 46 people jump off the Golden Gate Bridge every year, and hundreds more are stopped by guards. In central Stockholm, there's a bridge called Västerbron, the West Bridge, that unfortunately shares some similarities with the Golden Gate Bridge in that regard. There have been many suicides from this bridge. In fact, it used to be one of the most common places in Sweden to commit suicide. You see this wire railing? It was added in the mid-2010s to prevent people from jumping off the bridge. And it's actually working. There's been a lot fewer suicide attempts after these bridge railings were put up. But I'd say that it's still a sort of comparable place to San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge. And the view from up here is quite spectacular, isn't it? The Sydney Opera House is famous for its bold and distinctive design. The building opened in 1973 and was designed by the Danish architect Utson. Utson attended the Royal Danish Academy of Fine Arts between 1937 and 1942, and in 1957 he took part in a competition to design the new Sydney Opera House. The competition had 233 entries from famous architects from 32 different countries, but this unknown Danish architect was the one who won. He was called a genius by one of the judges, and he was praised for how his design embellished the natural beauty of the location. Then started a massive project to actually get the opera house built, which took 16 years. During that time, Jan Utson also did a lot of other work. Among other things, he made the designs for a luxury villa in the south of Sweden that would end up being called Villa Härneryd. In 1962, Olof Härneryd hired a young Danish architect to make the designs for his new house, and he built it here, close to the town of Helsingborg. So if you can't go to Sydney, you can still see a house designed by the architect who designed the Sydney Opera House, here in Sweden. Or actually, you can't really see a lot of it because it's of course not open to the public. It's a private house. But you can do what I do and admire some small glimpses of it from the road. It's not much, but it's what we've got here in Sweden. Some people call Kinnekulle Limestone Quarry Sweden's Grand Canyon or the Little Grand Canyon. But to be honest, it's not even close. I mean, this video is full of Swedish budget alternatives to world-famous tourist destinations, but I don't think I can make this comparison. It's an absolutely gorgeous location, but it's just too dissimilar to Grand Canyon to include it in this list. And it's man-made as well, it doesn't even make sense to compare it. Oh well, let's just enjoy the view for a bit before we move on to the next proper item in this list. Central Park in New York is famous all over the world, and it's a place full of flora and fauna in the middle of Manhattan. It's also full of art and culture and architecture. But it's also located far to the west, over that little pond we call the Atlantic. Getting there would take 7 hours on a flight, and then you'd have to fight the New York traffic to get to the park. Instead, you can simply take a stroll in Royal Djurgården in Stockholm. There you can see museums and amusement parks, and also the combined zoo and open-air museum Skansen. You can also see royal palaces and gardens and art exhibits and a lot more. This might actually be a case where the Swedish alternative is better than the one abroad. If you include both North and South Djurgården, it covers an area of 1,000 hectares. That's 3 times the size of Central Park and 7 times the size of Hyde Park in London. And I'd say that the entertainment options here are better than the ones in Central Park. So on that bombshell, I think it's about time to end this video. I hope you enjoyed this look at Swedish alternatives to famous tourist attractions all over the world. Now I think you know what to do. Like and subscribe, but most importantly, have a great day.